Intake and adequacy of the vegan diet, a systemic review of the evidence. This is published just a few months ago, May 2021. It says, regarding macronutrients, vegan diets are lower in protein intake compared to all other diet types. Veganism is also associated with lower intakes of vitamin B2, B3, B12, D, iron, or D, iodine, zinc, calcium, potassium, and selenium. So when you find somebody, if you're having a conversation and, talking to them about the vegan protein, you can work from a basis of understanding, the vegan diet, right, has some challenges to it. Often they don't want to admit that, but nevertheless, the science says that there are some challenges. Here's some more information, what to watch for on bone health. Vegan diets and bone health, results of a cross-sectional study. This one is also from earlier this year again. It says the conclusion is vegan diets had lower levels of vitamin A, B2, lysine, zinc, selenoprotein P, which don't even worry about what that is, N3, omega-3 fatty acids, urinary iodine, calcium levels. Well, the concentration of K1, folate, and glutamine are higher. You would think that because if you eat a lot of vegetables, you're going to get a lot of K1 and the like. Okay, that's generally where you find vitamin K, is in green leafy vegetables. Here's another one, vegetarian and vegan diets and the risk of total and site-specific fractures. This is from actually last year. And you can see all this. Overall, we found that compared to meat eaters, vegans had a higher risk of total hip, leg, vertebral fractures, while fish eaters and vegetarians had a higher risk of hip fractures, which they've decided is because they tend to be more active and likely to do something that's going to fracture their hips. B12 is very important. You probably all know that. It's fundamental to maintaining a homocysteine balance in your body. It's fundamental for energy production. If you get anemia, pernicious anemia, is that vitamin B12 anemia. Big portions of the vegan population run around anemic, having B12 anemia, or pernicious anemia. As this research points out, this is from 2019. Conclusion, a major health concern of individuals adhering to the vegan diet without supplementation is a risk of B12 deficiency. So they're saying, you need a supplement. The vegan diet's good, but don't blindly walk down the vegan path. Understand what the limitations are. Understand, what your risks are by doing that. So B12 is a big one. Second study here says serum concentrations of B12 and folate in British male omnivores. They'll eat anything, those Brits. Vegetarians and vegans, another cross-sectional study, big study. That was from back in 2010. However, they concluded that vegans have lower B12 concentrations and higher folate, and half of the vegans are categorized as B12 deficient. Half of the vegans that they checked the bloodstream on were anemic, had pernicious anemia. Now, you might not think that that's really bad, and moment to moment it is, but years of persisting in pernicious anemia undermines really important metabolic activities that go on inside your body. Besides energy production and managing homocysteine, B12 is involved in vision health and a lot of other things. So in the absence of that, especially in a deficient state, you set yourself up long-term for a lot of problems. So whatever the advantage they may think they're getting from a vegan diet, again, they need to do it with their eyes open and understand what the limitations are. What to watch for on protein. Here's another little bit of information that, it's sort of useful to know, especially if you're out talking to people about these things. Legumes are proteins versus calories. So you can see that all of these sources of beans, legumes, have a lot of protein relative to the calories. You can see that soybeans have the most. Okay, so this is from the USDA. So what that does is it gives you, this is where the vegan will go for their protein, okay, if they can get enough. But down here, all of these nutrients are what we call high FODMAPs. They're fermentable oligosaccharides. It's a complex thing, but they ferment inside your gut. And if you have irritable bowel or colitis or any digestive sensitivities or disorders, you're likely to experience, in all probability, going to experience a lot of discomfort that will go beyond flatulence, which is more of an embarrassment than a discomfort. Flatulence, you all know what flatulence are? Okay. So I think, again, when you're talking to people in these situations, if they're, I've had people I've talked to say, I've always had gastric distress, so I've decided to become a vegan. Well, you're probably setting yourself up for bigger problems if you do that, simply because the types of protein-rich foods that you would consume are highly fermentable in the gut and will create all sorts of localized inflammations and so on. So it's good to know what to watch for. Protein, vegan diets, practical advice for athletes and exercisers. You know, I'm an exerciser. Anybody else in the room an exerciser? Good. If you didn't raise your hand, you should think about exercising soon. Here's what it says, though. Plant-based protein sources are often incomplete, we know that, missing important essential amino acids and typically contain less branched-chain amino acids than their animal-based counterparts. Now, just an aside, when we introduced our vegetarian protein or vegan protein, right, what we told you a couple of things. We said, no, unlike that, it is complete because we used so many sources and handled putting those together in that way it was complete. And we told you that it was rich in branched-chain amino acids. Because we know this work, you know, we're just not putting a product out to make the claim vegan. We're putting a product out to fulfill the needs of a person who has a vegan lifestyle. And one of the things that they don't get enough protein, in particular, they don't get complete proteins or branched-chain amino acids, which is why we make a point of telling you that on the label. What to watch for on omega-3s, omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids in the vegetarian diet, right? While the intake of omega-3 fatty acid as alpha-linolenic acid are similar in vegetarians and non-vegetarians, intake of EPA and DHA, that's the two primarily active omega-3 fatty acids, is low in vegetarians and virtually absent in vegans. So here's what they're going to tell you when you encounter that. They're going to say, well, I eat a lot of plant-based sources that have a lot of alpha-linolenic acid in it, okay? And alpha-linolenic acid is the first omega-3 that occurs at the interface between plants and animals. If you look at our story about our omega-3 product, Salmon Oil Plus, you see we start all 8, we start with alpha-linolenic acid because that's the starting point. The hard bit, though, is getting to the other end of that process and getting to the EPA and the DHA, EPA, DHA, which are really the most biologically active in the human body. Those are the ones we like the most and our body makes the greatest use of. What we find if you're just getting ALA, the process of converting ALA, what's called elongation, as you go up the chain, it gets slower and slower and slower. When you're young and vital and running around out there, it's maybe okay. If you start to get a little older, it goes down real quickly. And it's just something that everybody that's on a vegan diet should watch out for. Now, the answer to that question for them is, what do we have in terms of a vegan omega-3? Well, the reality is we don't have one. Because EPA, DHA, EPA, and all those others don't exist in plants. They only exist in animals, which is why we use fish. So if they have an issue with that, they probably just give them a little heads up, but don't try to convince them to make a move because it's one of those difficult transitions to get them to embrace the idea that we can't exist without some form of animal nutrition, even though it's been part of our food supply for as long as there's been a food supply. Okay. Vegan diet, practical advice for athletes and exercisers. Due to the absence of marine lipid fats, vegans appear to consume fewer omega-3 fatty acids and possess lower omega-3 fatty acid levels than omnivores. This might have important health and performance implications. When researchers tell you this might do something, they mean they would like to tell you it will, but they want to get more money to do more research, because as soon as they tell you it will, then the story's over. But it says if it might, well, then we need to continue to investigate, right? You got to make a living. What to watch for women? This is particularly important for women. Actually, there are more women vegans than men. Iron status of vegetarian adults. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It says low intakes of iodine, selenium again. No, it says all studies except one with female Adventist vegans, vegetarians, and women had a considerable higher prevalence of anemia. So this is iron deficiency anemia, another form of anemia. So if you put that together with B12 anemia, if you happen to be on that plane, you've dug a really big hole for yourself, okay? Here's another one, low intakes of iodine, selenium amongst vegetarians, women, highlights a potential nutritional vulnerability. If you're wondering why this got scrambled, is I set mine up in PowerPoint on my Microsoft-based deal, and it's being played by on an Apple device, so it's his fault. Just kidding. Happens all the time. So it says, anyway, adhering to a vegan diet is associated with lower intakes of key micronutrients, including B12 and D and calcium, iron, extremely low reported intakes of iodine and selenium amongst vegetarians, and especially vegans, combined with their limited food availability and diets which omit animal foods, highlights both these areas of concern. Again, this is an area where people who are doing the vegan deal, they need to be aware. You can inform them. I don't think you're going to transition them over to being multivores, but you can inform them nevertheless.